So we are finally, after 40 years of off and on conflict, attacking Iran. And of course, there's a flood of nonsense happening across social media. And so I think this might be part of a reset for American foreign policy. One of the big takeaways from the end of the GWOT was that somehow that was a military disaster for the United States. Even though we lost 7,000 men KIA across two countries over 20 years, conquering both, successfully stabilizing one of them, killing our main antagonist in the form of bin Laden by proxy in Pakistan in another, preventing another Salafi attack on the United States. Even though we did all of that for the cost of 7,000 KIA, it was somehow a grand disaster. So maybe that narrative is going to change. Kind of seems like a lot of Americans were at face value like, oh yeah, we're just, we're going to lose America's losing all the wars after World War II. And then you look at history after World War II, and even countries that are able to fight decisive wars have various political quagmires afterwards, because geopolitics in our international order is so different that conquering anything decisively always makes you look like the bad guy. And you always have to have these various political motives and constraints on your expression of power, right? No war since World War II has been particularly decisive for anyone, let alone the United States. Kind of a tangent, but we're finally attacking Iran. And of course, it's pretty clear there's no direct strategy at the top. It is overdue. I mean, I'm surprised it took someone this long to do it, because of course when you stop doing diplomacy with the Iran nuclear deal, you're going to put yourself, this was always weird about Trump and Trump's base being anti-war, was that when you removed any kind of diplomacy in the Iran nuclear deal, and they all talked about how terrible it was and this and that, this was a universal talking point on the right-leaning independent space and the Republican base about the Iranian nuclear deal. Various lies were told about it. That's a whole other story. But when you remove yourself from that diplomatic process, you put yourself on a collision course to go to war if your goal is to remove the nuclear program, right? So it could have stopped at the 12-day war. That could have been declaration of victory and just walk away. Looks like Israel was going to attack them, and so we knew we were going to get attacked. But we're going to have various problems in the war. We're going to run out of Patriot interceptors. We're going to have to learn how to deal with drones. This is just common. If we get involved on the ground, it's a whole other story. We're going to have to face FPV drones. It's going to be a real fucking problem for our people, and we're going to lose people. But the main narrative that I've seen for a long time, which is really weird, is, oh, Iran is so strong, look how big it is. And the two most famous examples you can think of Iran being stomped the fuck out and conquered outright would be Alexander the Great, who did it with 50,000 men against the original OG Persian Empire, which was way stronger than modern Iran. And then the other example being Genghis Khan, who defeated the Khwarezmian Empire, and that was significantly stronger than modern Iran and included vast portions of Central Asia. Its capital was in Samarkand, of all places. So those are two very famous examples. Of course, Genghis Khan killed millions of people when he did that. Not to even speak of all the other wars which Iran has completely lost. In fact, Iran has lost every major war against a major power it's ever fought. It lost against, every Iranian dynasty. The Sassanids were defeated by the Eastern Romans, the Byzantines, under Emperor Heraclius, and then they were defeated and ultimately conquered by the Arabs. The Parthians before them were gutted. You know, they were invaded by the White Huns. They were invaded by the Ephialtes, is what they call it. Invaded by the Romans so many times and made into the province of Mesopotamia, and capital burned probably 6 times. The last time being Emperor Carus. So this is an obscure reference, but the Persian army was on the other side of the empire fighting the White Huns. That was the Sasanians, but Sasanians, Parthians, you know, easy to get them confused, but they're separate ethno-linguistic groups, both Iranic speaking. But then you keep going through history. Okay, you've got the Safavids. Well, they lose against the Ottomans. The Ottomans kick the shit out of them. Iran, ironically enough, for these people that want to use Afghanistan as an example of American military failure, was conquered by Afghans in 1722. So I don't know what the reference is there, because Iran was conquered. They didn't lose a small war. They didn't get bored and go home. They were invaded, right? This is Persia, the home of so much learning and culture in the Islamic world. It's the lingua franca of every conceivable culture in the Islamic world. The home of the lingua franca, you know, Persian. And it's getting conquered by these hill people, right? So it's just weird. And then you look at the 20th century, and there are pretty much 2 examples there. They're really easy. Got the British and the Soviets invading them and taking virtually no losses and stomping the shit out of the Iranians in 1941. And then you have the Iran-Iraq War, which the Iranians were always militarily inferior to the Iraqis in the first place. So in response to the Iraqis trying to seize a town in Khuzestan, which is the Arabic-speaking portion of Iran, they need to draft children into death squads and run them through minefields, right? So they end up grinding the Iraqis down and invading Iraq, and then getting thrown out of Iraq. They wanted to control the Shah al-Arab, and then of course Reagan sinks the Iranian Navy in a day, etc., etc. So they were beaten by Iraq, the same country that we famously spent basically 10 years or so throwing up against the wall to feel better about ourselves, right, and remove that threat from the Middle East. They're never a military threat to really rival us, but they definitely have, killed Americans in the past, and so it's pretty surprising that Trump would do this. But one of the problems you're going to have is, of course, the Russians are feeding the Iranians satellite intelligence, and so I wonder if Trump is going to be a Putin cuck again and just let this happen, get Americans killed, or if he wakes up and decides, maybe we need to let the Ukrainians throw the Russians out or something. That's hopeful thinking, but wishful thinking on my part. But yeah, I mean, I could easily see a scenario where the United States just bombs Iran for 10 years. It's doable. It's what we did to Iraq. We didn't just beat them in the Gulf War and destroy like most of their military. We bombed them continuously through the 90s. So that's a possibility. You would just have a permanent pseudo war. Iran has already attacked every country around it to a ridiculous degree, so that's pissing everybody off. And there's no mutual defense treaty. The Chinese aren't going to come to Iran's defense. They might sell them weapons, of course, or components to weapons to make money. China's got its own agenda, and they're not particularly keen on starting gigantic, costly hot wars with all the powers around them. But you could create a situation with the war in Iran where you run low on Patriot interceptors, and it becomes enticing to start a war somewhere else. Like if the Russians want to take the Baltics, or if China wants to challenge Taiwan, something like that. So that's the question. And then the other question politically is, if it becomes very unpopular, it is very unpopular, is does it remove the United States from wanting to defend its allies in situations where it absolutely should as a just war, and remove American military power basically from the Eastern Hemisphere entirely, and we end up being a Western Hemispheric hegemon, the most powerful of a couple of hegemons globally, but a hegemon. It just very much depends on the whims of the American electorate, which is very fickle. You could easily see a Democratic president coming to power in 20. It's going to be Rubio or Newsom, but Americans went from Obama to Trump to Biden, Trump again. It's a fickle kind of electorate that doesn't think things through, and there's no ideology in the United States. But this is not necessarily going to be World War III unless Russia decides to fight the United States, and that's the only country that really would. China does not. It's not very warlike. It's fought very small wars against outmatched opponents, and then it fought in Korea. Okay, it fought a war with Vietnam, fought a war with India, and other than that, really hasn't done much to go outside of its own borders. It's got what it wanted in the South China Sea without exactly going to war with all of its neighbors. It pushed them around. It's trying to bully the Philippines. The United States isn't going to go to war with China, I don't think. I think if something started in Taiwan, it would be up to Japan and the Philippines and Taiwan to take care of it. Because the Chinese have such a vast shipbuilding capacity that there's no way we can compete with it. And nobody wants to say that out loud, but their shipbuilding industry can produce 1,000 ships a year. We're doing 10, so the math isn't there for us. There's no way. We'd have to be investing in naval drones, drone carriers, stuff like that. There's a demonstrable ability of a B-1 bomber to drop a JDAM onto a ship. So, there's a way to combat what's going to be Chinese naval supremacy. That is what it's going to be. They're going to build 6 carriers. Like 2 or 3 of them are going to be Ford-sized, right? Not a pushover country. It's not the 1990s. This is not a situation we get into. The best outcome for everybody, if Taiwan was willing, would be a diplomatic solution where they get some kind of deal. Of course, when Xi's out, you might get somebody who's not interested in whatever the fuck he's doing and just wants business as usual. Because America, historically, we've never fought a bloody war with anyone. Our bloodiest war was one in which 700,000 people died. And look at all of our global peers and ask yourself if they would like to be in that position, right? What's the bloodiest war Russia's fought? What's the bloodiest war Japan's fought? Just go down the list. Pretty much every country has fought a hell of a lot more wars with a lot more death. But yeah, Iran doesn't have, this ballistic missile thing they're doing, it's not effective. It's not going to work. It didn't work when, Hussein tried it in the Gulf War. That's the last time there was a ballistic missile threat. Ballistic missiles don't matter unless there's a nuke on them. That's when they gain strategic significance. It's a nuisance weapon, and it has been since it was invented. You know, if strategic bombing is such a failed, supposedly failed strategy to deal with an adversary, to force a political into a war, then why are those same people claiming that Iran is going to magically get its political will imposed on the entire Gulf, or get us to quit just by firing a few missiles at everybody?